everyone. Welcome back to the Collin Cadmus Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Alex Smith. Alex received her bachelor's degree from the University of Alabama in 2012 and then started her sales career at SinglePlatform, where we met and worked together in New York City as she quickly rose from a top-performing salesperson to sales management positions. After SinglePlatform, Alex became the director of sales development at Ritual Hot Yoga, Flexport, and Headspace, until landing her most recent and current position as Director of Sales at TestGorilla. She also serves as a consultant and advisor to top startups around the world. Alex is one of the most energetic and positive people I've ever had the pleasure of working with, and I've been watching her career from afar for many years, but it's been a long time since we last caught up, so I'm excited to get her thoughts on all that's changing in B2B sales and find out what's working and what isn't for her team at TestGorilla. Before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave us a comment if you have questions or feedback. If you're joining us from Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please drop us a review and let us know what you think of the episode. This is much appreciated as it really helps to grow the audience. Without further ado, let's dive in and get her thoughts. Alex, thanks for joining me and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Collin. I'm so excited to be here. And yes, it's been a long time since we caught up, so it's going to be a great discussion.
Well, you look the same. You look fantastic.
Thank
Your
you.
energy is still at an 11 of a 1 to 10 scale. So I'm ready to rock and roll here. And you've done so much. You have, been through, I think I want to say your longest role was Headspace, right? Since leaving there. So that's where you spent a big bunch of time. But you've been through so many roles here. And so I'm particularly excited to figure out and sort of get your taste on some of these topics. And what I've done here, I don't know if you've heard previous episodes or whatnot, but over the last 20 plus episodes, I've been interviewing people on some hot topics, basically things that I've had a lot of sort of friendly debates on LinkedIn, and different topics around like what's going on with sales, like what's changing. I think, a lot of things have been changing, but the pandemic and everything sort of like supercharged a lot of changes, pushing people to remote. Now we have AI coming into the game. And then you had the financial market that sort of, pushed people away from this growth at all cost thing. And so there's kind of all these moving pieces that I want to get your thoughts on. And for those who are listening, you've probably heard previous episodes where I've interviewed some people from SinglePlatform, so you might be familiar at this point with the company and what we did there. But as a refresher, we were doing full outbound sales. We had no marketing team. We were pounding the phones, calling small businesses, 100 plus dials a day. And it was a super repeatable, super proven process. And so, what was really cool is when I joined there, like the month later, they got acquired, the month before they got acquired. And we just were on like this supercharged run because the company was doing less than $1 million in revenue. It was so new, but was acquired for $100 million. And so we had this really unique scenario of like, it's a startup, but it's also like got all this money and it's already got the excitement of being, exited and whatnot. And so it was a super unique experience. And I think, at least for me, and I know a bunch of the other people I spoke to, it was kind of like a shock to leave there and go elsewhere. And, it sounds like most of us, I'm curious to get your thoughts, but I spoke to Lee and Joe and other folks. And it's all like, we all sort of left thinking we could just take what we learned and like rubber stamp it to some extent. And like it sounds like kind of went through that, like the first 6 months in the next role, like, whoa, this is really different. I need to like really learn this and all that stuff. So anyway, I want to get your thoughts on all of that, but let's start at the top here. I want to talk about what I'm referring to as the broken outbound model, whatever you want to, label it as. You may disagree. You may say it's not broken. But I've asked this question in a few ways. I was originally asking people like, what's broken about the outbound model and like, how did we get here? But I've rephrased it a little bit so that you have a chance to potentially disagree if you disagree. And so the question is traditional outbound sales broken, dead, or dying? If yes, how so? Wherever you'd like to go on that topic.
Okay, great. I am very passionate about this topic because I have spent a huge portion of my senior leadership career working in the head of sales development role. So I've been really close to all things inbound, outbound pipeline, how things have been evolving over the last couple of years. And so, yes, I would challenge a bit on the terminology around dead, dying, broken. I think it's evolving for sure. And I think that there are parts of the process that are tried and true that we'll discuss, but there are new ways of operating that have to be introduced in order for an outbound motion to be successful. The other thing that's really interesting is that we forget that when we do talk about outbound prospecting, that the term outbound is simply a word to describe the motion in which that we're reaching out to somebody. And that's an important distinction because this day and age, there's going to be a lot of different varying levels of intent when it comes to prospecting that we may or may not have, depending on what kind of tools that you have that you're using for outbound prospecting or inbound lead generation. You get intent data, you get insights through a lot of these different tools that you use now. And so, depending on that intent level, should depend on the motion in which that you reach out to someone too. So, outbound, sure. Like you said, we come from a world where we bang the phones and we bang the emails and we get people to say yes.
Yeah.
And we're able to be successful, getting meetings and pipelines booked.
We assumed everyone there was intent, basically.
Exactly.
But it was a simple sale, like, so it kind of made sense there. Yeah.
Right. But the thing that is tried and true that does not change is the mentality that you need to have when you're prospecting, that was something that was really ingrained in the DNA from the world that we come from. But now you layer on the different ways in which people buy now. Most people will like to do their own research now.
Mm-hmm.
They like to see you 2 or 3 times, ideally before you actually reach out to them in relevancy at the right time to say, hey, wanted to introduce myself. This is what we have going on. I noticed that you were cruising around on this. We have to engage in that way more now than just saying flying blindly, we're going to make 100 dials and let's see what happens. Because this day and age, going back to the things that are broken is when you look at the time that's being spent to call. And I know that I think that you were at Air Call for a while, right? That company.
Yeah.
So, the time that it takes for someone to do 100 cold calls now is not effective. And you might come away at the end of the day with zeros, which is what a lot of people are dealing with now. So very low connection rate because in 2025, a lot less people pick up their phone. So you have to invest in the right tech stack now in order for outbound motion to be successful. Also, if you're a company and you're not investing in some sort of inbound lead generation or intent data, then that is going to be a huge miss. And everything that you're doing from an outbound standpoint will also not be effective. You have to have some sort of intent tools in place to help guide and shape the conversation, even if it is an outbound motion. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Well, that perfectly tees us up into the next topic, and I completely agree, right? And I think there's like I was like 100% in the camp of everything you just said. The one thing that made me like second guess a little bit of it was when I met with Adam, and I realized that, wait a minute, there are still some companies that are doing this hyper transactional cold call thing. And it's very unique to what they're selling. It has to be something where like the total addressable market is enormous. They have to answer their phones because it's maybe a storefront or they have an assistant or like there's a gatekeeper that's like job is to answer the phone. And it could be very transactional. Like what he's selling, my understanding at the time is they don't even need to like collect a payment. They just need to get their agreement that they'll use it. And then over time they start billables. And so like there are those like edge cases where I realize, well, okay, is still this world of like people pounding the phones. But for traditional like B2B, you're selling software or something to another B2B company, yeah, it's become wildly difficult. Most people don't have like an office phone on their desk. So you can't even figure out their extension or whatever. I've got my cell phone on Do Not Disturb all day long, right? So it's a whole different game in that regard. So yeah, I'm totally with you. And yeah, we learned. I mean, at SinglePlatform, we had no inbound, right? I mean, maybe a little bit from some referrals or something. And I want to say that even went to like our account management team. I don't even know if they sent those like to sales, or maybe they did at some point. I can't even remember. But yeah, it's completely different. And so the marketing and the intent and all this stuff, like it's game changer. When I finally worked at a company that had that, I was like, whoa, like, so hold on a second. So you can invest this money over here and like build this sort of optimized engine of like ads and SEO and all this stuff. And you can just have leads that come to you and like, wow. And that was game changer. And you start to see how like when those two start to work together and you can start to bring down your cost because now you're making a cold call to someone who's like, oh yeah, I think I saw you at that trade show, or I think I got that email, or I think I saw your webinar, or this or that. And you have these multi touch points, you become familiar, all that sort of stuff, like 100% with you on that. It's game changer. And I don't think there's any other way to do it today, with the exception of sort of those, those Adam Liebman type companies, as I'll call them for
Yes.
now. But
And just
go
to
ahead.
layer on to that too, in something that I think that I was surprised after I left single platform was the level of training that we had, because that is the
Mm,
other really important piece. So it's okay if you're going to have a model where you have people bang the phones and your most successful metric in booking meetings is through cold calls. That's okay. There will be businesses that have that. However, it's how effective are you also when you do get someone on the phone? And where
yeah.
I have found that most organizations that I have been at, people are not effective with cold calling. So it's not that it doesn't work. It's certainly a channel that you don't want to forget.
Yeah.
But that is a really important thing that is not as invested in as it should be.
And it might be double-edged sword too. And I see this a lot more with enterprise teams. And this is why I always push. I'm like, you really should just always have an SMB team, even if you're gonna, move up market and have a lot of enterprise and all that stuff. But like, just from a training standpoint alone, you get so many more at bats when you're doing SMB, right? We were making 100+ cold calls a day. And
Mhm.
we were connecting because we are calling small businesses. We were connecting almost every time, right? Someone was answering the phone. So after a week at single platform, you made more cold calls than most enterprise salespeople are making in a year.
Mhm.
And so the training, trajectory is completely different. And I think the level of comfort, like we were broken in by the end of week one on the phones. That was like that first Friday of like on the phones for a full week. Like there were those, two or three people who were like crying in the bathroom, couldn't handle it, ready to quit. They're vomiting, they're
Correct.
nervous, and then everyone else was like, "You're in it, and you're gonna figure this out." But it happens so fast. I just don't think you can really do that when you're, working such a small strategic account list and you're barely making dials. So yeah, tons of upside in that regard. But you transitioned us perfectly to the next topic. You mentioned sales tools and whatnot. So I want to get your thoughts here because everyone I think has different favorite tools today. There are, for every tool that solves a problem, there's like 20 options now for whether it's intent or whether it's how you're automating your emails or all that sort of stuff. So what are your top tools? I mean, what are you using? Do you have like specific tools that are your favorite that when you go to a company, you're like bringing it with you? Or do you kind of just use what they have? What's your take there?
Yeah, so we're thinking about new business revenue and we're thinking about building pipeline for new business revenue and we're talking about prospecting, right? So that's the umbrella. So the things that come underneath that, in my opinion, are some foundational tools that you must have in order to be successful with prospecting. So, this day and age is you need to have obviously some sort of cadence management platform. Pick your favorite, SalesLoft, Outreach, Apollo, and all of them are doing great things that have, same, but different features and pricing and all that good stuff. So
I'm with you on that. They're all pretty comparable. Yeah.
exactly. But the Gong sales workspace that is been being developed as their newest feature is by far the most impressive tool I see in the market right now. And I've
Is
definitely
that the
spent,
Gong, the email cadence tool that they built?
yes, and it's
I
called the
just
sale.
just heard about
Yes.
it yesterday. Yeah.
And the sales workspace. So the other thing about being successful in prospecting is having a workflow and a workspace that actually connects all of the different tools and things. So that way the person who is prospecting is able to be effective. And again, that is also an afterthought sometimes when people are thinking about effective prospecting. They're like, well, if I just get all these 10 tools and then now they don't talk to each other and you have people working in 10 different places. So
Yeah.
their tool actually brings in all of the different tools into one place. And from a prospecting standpoint, what's really great is that they suggest, of course, to have some sort of intent tool like a Sixth Sense or something else that might align where you're gathering intent data about people who are liking things on your page or opting into your downloads or webinars, right? And it's taking all of that plus whatever outbound motion you're doing, and it starts to feed you the prompts as to what is a priority for you to action on, who needs a follow-up response, and then it's helping at least auto generate through AI a very relevant template that you could use to speak directly to the behavior that that person has engaged with. And so that is really smart. And the reason why that's really smart is because, again, the old way of operating is that, you have to build a cadence, copy for every single person and every single scenario and every single
Mm,
particular thing that they might have been interested at some point. And by the time you go and do that, the timing is not relevant. And so it's so important to have that type of tool in place right now. So that way you're speaking directly to their engagement. It's timely, it's relevant. And also you as a salesperson are receiving that prompt on what to prioritize. Because otherwise, we build account lists and we say run after them, but that's a lot to manage. You're talking about hundreds of contacts,
yeah.
hundreds of accounts. To manage that these days is very challenging. So I love that. I also think you have to separate yourself from the sea of sameness and you've got to invest in video prospecting. I'm huge on that. It's very clear across the board in any company that I've worked at, probably within the last 5 years, that incorporating video prospecting is going to significantly increase your reply rates. And at the end of the day, a lot of these AI tools that are super funky out there that we're still learning about right now that all say they're solving the whole thing around more meetings on calendars. The reality is I haven't really seen a super effective tool doing that. It's still obviously powered by a salesperson. And what's interesting about that piece too is you see these high open rates, but we want reply rates. We
Yeah.
want meetings booked. And so these are some of
Bingo.
the tools that I would use. And obviously, you have to have a dialer. And again, your outbound or your prospecting motion in general will be broken if you don't have an effective dialing solution. Because again, you need something that is going to call out until someone answers, or you're going to have someone spending 8 hours for the day doing 100 cold calls and they might come up with a zero, which is not effective.
So you're talking about
So,
parallel dialers where they're kind of hitting multiple numbers and connecting them. Yeah, we had
exactly.
those have evolved a lot over the years. It sounds
Right.
like they used to be really weak. They used to have a major flaw, which was that once it connected you, there was just a big delay. And so if you're like the person who picks up the phone, you're like, "Hello," it would be like this weird gap between like when the salesperson finally got there. But it sounds like they've found ways to solve for that problem, and things are much faster now. So
Mhm.
if you can, I mean, God, that would have been amazing at Single Platform. I don't know. Did you guys ever end up using that there after I left? I know we tested it when I was there, and it just wasn't so good at the time. Yeah,
No, not that. But that was 10 plus years ago. It's definitely
yeah,
evolved so much from then.
yeah,
But
yeah.
those are essential tools. Like what we're talking about right now, I wouldn't say are nice to haves. They're need to haves in order to build an effective pipeline engine for businesses that are trying to scale, 60, 70, 80% growth, which is what we're doing at TestGorilla right now.
Yeah. Wow. And yeah, I mean, you made a great point on, it's one thing if you can get a bunch of great open rates or whatnot, but like these things have to convert. And I feel like there's a lot of hacky advice out there, right? I saw something on Twitter yesterday. I mean, Twitter's like this place, or X that you call it. There's some great sales advice, and there's some that it's like, if you do this, you're insane, right? Someone's posting yesterday, and ironically, their account got blocked like a few hours later, but it went viral, and people were like, "Yeah, this is great." And he's like creating like AI images of beautiful women, making fake profiles on LinkedIn, and using that to like, I'm like, you're catfishing to prospect, and it's just like it's so short-sighted. He's like, well, look at the data, look at the response rates. It's like, okay, but what happens when they realize you're a liar and that your business is built on fake like employees that are not real? Like, this is not a way to build a brand, right? And it goes to your
Yeah.
point of like, you might get the open rate. What happens after that, right?
Yeah.
When they're not talking to a fake person, right? Like, so yeah, there's just so much hacky stuff like that. You mentioned video prospecting, Nito. Do you have a specific tool that you're using for that? Because there's so many, and I don't have a favorite per se.
I would say Vidyard continues to be my favorite.
Yeah.
That is the most intuitive platform to use. It does what it needs to do and it's simple. I think that's the other thing to keep in mind is that you don't need all of these complex features for prospecting. Like if anything, we need to simplify, but how do you
Mm.
simplify but needing 5 tools? And I like this tool for its simplicity and its user-friendly experience, the AI scripts and prompts that it uses. I have tested a couple of different tools, that say that they use AI so that way you record it once and then, the name is adapted to the person again, super clunky still. A lot
Yeah.
of these AI driven prospecting tools right now are still super clunky in
They're
getting to
so
me.
early. Yeah, yeah,
Correct.
they're very very early. A bunch of them. I'm excited about where a lot of it's going to go. We're going to get into that, so I don't want to
Yeah.
jump too far ahead. But actually, so I sort of changed the order of our questions here a little bit. I jumped into the tools first, and I was going to jump into sort of what's working for Outbound, but and we kind of covered some of that by going over the tools. But let's dive in if you've got more there. Like, what's actually working for you best today? I mean, we talked about the intent, obviously, sales engagement. Is there sort of some secret sauce in there, some things that you're working on, or maybe specific sort of places where you want to double click on the intent, like what signals specifically that you think are most valuable? Because I think when it comes to intent, that's where people sort of like we all agree intent sounds good. And then it's like people try to discuss like what are the actual signals that matter, right? Does it matter that they just read our blog? Like maybe, maybe not, but like, do you have specific signals that you have found, or wherever you want to go on that? I'm kind of answering it for you because I'm excited, but yeah, take it wherever you want to. What is actually working today?
What is actually working today always starts, I think, first and foremost with hiring the right person for the role. And I think that I know that that sounds like so far up the process, but it's step one, right?
Yeah.
Is making sure that you're hiring the right people to do effective outbound in this day and age. And that is always going to depend on the stage of the company and whether or not you're hiring people to execute on a playbook or you're going to be hiring people that are going to help you build the plane while it's already flying, which is a
Mm.
completely different profile.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, the other thing that's actually the second step to that is the structure. And so what's working really well is actually not having different teams that are labeled as inbound and outbound teams anymore. And so people are still really hung up on the idea that those two things have to be totally separate. For what reason, I'm still not exactly sure. I've heard all sorts of kind of excuses like, oh, well, it's cleaner for reporting. And the goal is to build pipeline. This day and age, it doesn't matter if it's coming from the person who engaged with us on a LinkedIn post or it's coming from the fact that I called them 3 times and they finally picked up and I
Mhm.
booked a meeting. At the end of the day, the goal is obviously to secure people with interest and get them to show up and put them into the pipeline. So I actually think that that's something that's really still very new that a lot of businesses are hanging up on creating like that real line.
Mm.
But a lot of the businesses that I talked to, I just went to Gong HQ in Dublin and was talking with the team there. And I asked them, do you have inbound and outbound kind of motions and structure? They're like, no, it's like we use these tools to understand who we should prioritize. We outreach them based on some of the information that we have, and then we book the meeting. So I
Yeah.
think that that's actually really important. And it's better for the person to be successful within the motion because then
Mm.
that person is dealing with a blend of different intents. So it's like, obviously, if you don't have anything warm or teed up from some of the systems that might be feeding you that information, then the motion obviously is to go and do the cold part. So that's really important. And I've seen the teams that end up separating themselves. Obviously, the inbound team is doing great, and then the outbound team is just out there left to see who's got a pulse. And it's not effective. And then you have a morale problem. And then if you don't have the right tech stack, you have people making dials all day long that can't connect with
Mhm.
people. You haven't obviously implemented any of the other features that might make this more efficient for that person, only doing cold outreach.
Mm.
So, that's the headline about that. But what does actually work, and this is what kind of comes back to what we said, which is not dying, is tried and true sales tactics, which is just connecting with people in a way that is relevant to them. If you don't think that they can't sniff, feel, see, and hear immediately that your stuff is templated or AI curated or automatically sent out through your cadence or sequence platform, I mean, you're doomed. And so
Yeah.
we can't mistake and discard the old ways of operating, which is to personalize to an extent, find a relevant way to connect with the person that you're speaking with, and hopefully using intent tools within a LinkedIn Sales Navigator,
Mm.
subscribing to all of the people that are in your account list. So that way you can sit down with your coffee in the morning and receive updates to what people that you want to obviously connect with are up to, posting wise, talking about, and then speaking and reaching out to them with relevancy and timing. Those are still the things that win. And so those were just some of the things that for sure continue to work. And also, uh, because I feel confident as a leader in teaching people how to have really effective cold calls, I would say that my sales teams are still, that channel is still one of the most effective channels for booking meetings.
It doesn't surprise me with you as their leader. Yeah. I bet you,
Effective
I'm
cold
going to
calls.
just take a guess here that you are still jumping on the phones and doing some calls with them and keeping the energy
Always.
up. Yeah. That is the reason that they like it, that they're doing it, that it's working for them because you're leading from the top. You're showing them that it's fun. And the second
You
it starts
have to
to,
make it
you
fun.
have to. You have to. And if you're not willing to get out there and make some calls, like it won't be fun. I don't know why it is, but when the leader joins the team on the phones, it becomes 1,000 times more fun to make cold calls. It just does. I don't know why, but that's the way it is, and you've got to do it. What I like about everything you're saying is it sounds like you have gotten comfortable enough in the role. Maybe you were like this right as you left single platform. I don't know, but you've gotten comfortable enough in your skin and in the role and whatnot to be able to break a status quo or to be able to say like, okay, maybe that doesn't make sense here. Like you talk about the inbound and the outbound thing. Like, first of all, I 100% agree with you that it doesn't make sense at all companies. In fact, maybe at most it doesn't. I only worked at one where it made sense to have it split, and perhaps that could change today with technology and whatnot. But Aircall was that one. And the reason for it was there was so much inbound. And we noticed really quickly that if we didn't respond to them like really fast, that the chance of getting them dropped off. And there was another reason, which was that our inbounds were very small deals. They tended to be like small startups with one or two or three users, whereas everything that we were trying to do sort of through Outbound was like targeting these bigger deals. And for that reason, we were like, okay, we have enough scale here where like an inbound rep is actually busy all day. It got to the point where we needed two of them. So in that case, where we had just this ridiculous engine of a marketing team, I was like,
Hmm.
okay, this is actually a full-time job for two people. And we were able to significantly increase like our conversions by having them own it. And there was no excuse of like, well, I couldn't respond. I was on a demo. Like,
Right.
so in that unique situation, like it made sense for us. But so often you see them trying to do that where like the inbound just sort of sitting there. Like, what are you doing all day? Right. And yeah.
Yes,
And
and
there's
you can
also,
auto enroll people on the inbound side,
yeah.
right? So anybody who does have high intent these days, if we capture that, the first touch point of, someone needing to respond, like you can automate that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that no
There's
longer becomes a bottleneck as to why this shouldn't look a little bit different to the evolution of where things are at now.
completely agree. Completely agree. Well, let's get your thoughts on this one. This one I'm excited for because you've been at so many companies now over the years since it's been so long since we spoke. So I don't know which was which. I mean, I can kind of guess in terms of like what their strategies were. But I don't really know. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. I imagine you've maybe had some of both experiences here. But the topic is growth at all cost. And the way I sort of define this is like the typical venture capital model, which is like, hey, we're going to raise a ton of money. We're going to spend it as fast as we can. We're going to try to grow as fast as we can. We don't care about profit, really. We just want as much top line growth as possible. And we don't even really care. Like, oftentimes we're spending $3 to make a dollar because we just want to capture that market share. And we've seen this all over the place. I mean, single platform, even though it was acquired, we were very much growth at all costs. Like, we were spending money ridiculously. We weren't worrying about margins or anything. We wanted market share, and like that was the value of what we were doing. But a lot of that has been sort of flipped upside down on its head. And for a few reasons, like I mentioned in the beginning, right? You've got first the pandemic happened, which impacted the financial markets. Everyone stopped buying software. A lot of people canceled because their companies went out of business. And so
Mhm.
everything just went down, right? And so people were like, okay, we need to stop spending so much money. We need to become sustainable and sort of weather the storm. I think that's where it came from, is they were like, well, let's just cut our costs back and get through this pandemic. But I think what happened there is a lot of people realize, well, maybe we don't need to go back to what we were doing. Maybe this is actually working better. Maybe we should aim for profit, and then we don't have investors telling us what to do. We don't have to hire 100 people and then fire 50. And maybe there's a better way to do this at the same time as all the AI is coming into the space, all these new tools, whether it's a parallel dialer, which isn't really AI, but just these things that make us more efficient and effective, plus the remote work. So lots of stuff, the financial piece, the economy, the remote work, the AI. I think there's three things that made this sort of new sort of like way of going to market. like efficient with a team that maybe doesn't have an office and they're distributed and everything's low cost. So anyway, I guess I want to get your thoughts on that. Like if you think like is growth at all costs dead, or do you think it's still going to come back when the markets get better? But I'd also like for you to mix in there a little bit of like what was the experience at the companies that you went through? Were they all growth at all costs? I'm thinking Headspace maybe was because they're spending tons on marketing and all that, but I could be wrong. Wherever you want to go on that topic.
Yes. So, growth at all costs, we could go a lot of different angles, but I'll first talk about my experiences at some of them. So, first things first, Headspace started that way, obviously, until things blew up in 2020. And then
Mm.
really what happened, mental health became an imperative thing to talk about overnight.
Yeah.
We were just riding the wave
That
of
had to
what
be
was.
good for business for you guys.
Yes,
Yeah.
2020 and 2021 was the biggest growth years for Headspace during that time. And a lot of people don't know this, but Headspace has been around for 10 years. So they were
Mm.
starting to pour the fuel on the fire when they brought me in, when they were first starting to take Headspace to the B2B market and offer it as, a mental health solution. And obviously it started out, us selling the Headspace thing as, kind of like discounted and bulk subscriptions. But then we went through a merger, we went through an acquisition, and we really hit the market on trying to become a comprehensive mental health solution for employers, which was so new. And so, I would
And that's
say
a hard
that
sale, right? Because most
super hard.
employers, they're like, well, we're already paying for the insurance. I would imagine that's like the first thing they think, right?
Yes. And so, but we really did seize the moment. And at the time, the inbound funnel tripled
Mm.
literally overnight in 2020.
Yeah.
And we still operated on a really lean team. So that worked out really well, obviously, for the growth at all costs plan. And when we were going through that, it definitely took a lot of different shapes. As you know, you've been through mergers and acquisitions and all of that. And if you don't get those right when you're going through those motions, and that's another whole topic that we could probably talk about at another
Mm.
time, is when, the business really starts to shape and behave differently. And since I was
Yeah.
there for, close to 5 years, I really saw the spectrum, and it became very different, of course, after we went through a merger and tried to really go into the market and play in the healthcare space. So
Mm.
there was like this line of us not being healthcare and getting by and doing our thing. And then we try to go here and it becomes very different.
Yeah.
So,
Harder.
yes. Well, I would say that every single year there's new challenges. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily harder than the last or more complex than the last. Once you've been through mergers or acquisitions or IPOs, or if you've worked in the startup space like we have, I would say it's relatively the same every single place that I've gone. I've never gone in and heard what I hear and fallen off my chair because I'm like, wow, I haven't seen that before, which I'm grateful, right? That I'm grateful for my experience. I've been at the right place at the right time, some luck there, obviously a lot of hard work, a lot of hours to kind of get there. But eventually, since you're on the consulting side, you see the patterns of what success can be if you get these elements and this recipe right and it comes together, it will equal success. Now, I will say TestGorilla is really interesting because we have, a 70% growth plan for this year. Like this is our year. We're at a Series A right now and we're going for our Series B. And so we decided to obviously double the sales team, which we did in Q1. I think I hired, I don't know, about 20 people. This is a company that's also based in Europe.
So you went from 20 to
Historically.
40 people?
Yes,
Oh, cool.
25 to 50 pretty much
Cool.
is the math. Leaders, SDRs, AEs, and this company is based in the Netherlands, and I think this is a super progressive product in the market that is really disruptive, and they're all about hiring people based on the skills that it actually takes to do the job. And they're like waging war on the fact that CVs and resumes are dead and outdated,
Mm.
and also very costly if you have a mishire. And so they're really trying to optimize that process. But what's interesting though is like we for sure are operating at a growth at all costs. However, we're coming up in the second half of the year. We're looking at where we're at with revenue, and now it's starting to change.
Mm. Are you getting pressure to start cutting things back or not necessarily at the time?
For sure, things are on pause that
Yeah.
were in plan for the second half of the year until we get to 80% capacity of what we already funded and stood up in the first half of this year.
Got
And
it.
that's where we're at. And so for sure, we need to rewire and relook at things for the second half of the year as we continue to go forward.
Well, that's not a bad thing, right?
No.
There's actually something nice about your company having enough awareness to say like, hey, let's slow down, let's sort of look at things like
Hmm.
rather than this constant like just keep go 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 go, keep spend higher higher higher. It's like at a certain point the problems just start compounding, right? And if you bring on too
Correct.
many people, everything gets harder to fix, all that. You mentioned the Netherlands, so I'll just mention if you don't know Jocko van der Kooi, I know he's from there. I'm not sure if he's still living there, but check him out. He's out there. He's a genius. You should network with him
Will do.
if you ever make your way out there. He runs a consultancy called Winning by Design, but he is
Yes,
one of the most
of
brilliant
course.
sales minds. Yeah, yeah. And I've had him on the podcast a bunch of episodes ago, but that's what I think about when you say the Netherlands. But yeah, I mean, I'm completely with you. So you're going from Series A to B, 70% growth rate, doubled the sales team. So you're moving fast. I mean, you're
Really
not
fast.
because you were been there for 8 months, right?
Not even. I started at the end of October. So I think what did I just surpass my 6 months there? So
Wow.
it's been incredible. And under my leadership too, I'm one of maybe just a few Americans that work for this company. And so it was really big for them to invest in growing their new business revenue for North America. And when they looked at what they've done in the last 3 years, which is super impressive, by the way, one of our main investors was the old CEO of LinkedIn. And so we have a lot of people backing this that are very smart and capable. And we have, our CEO and co-founders, ex-Bain consultants, and just a really amazing group of high performing people. But what I'll say is, what I noticed when I first came in is that in order for obviously us to scale in North America, there are many different things that the business will need to adapt in order for us to be successful in this market. And so I really kind of got to come in with my advisor and consulting background as well, and really help shape how we're going to continue to get the word out about TestGorilla in the North America market. But that is certainly one of my biggest challenges, other than just the actual scale that's being managed at this point.
Yeah, it's I worked for Aircall, which you mentioned earlier, which is a Paris-founded company, French company. Um, Learning the new cultures, like when I'll just tell you, I'll just say, like when I first went there, I thought I was gonna like not like it, maybe. And I mean, when I first arrived, like after the first week or so, like I sat through some meetings, and I couldn't understand what some people were saying, and I don't know that they really understood me. And I kind of would walk out of these meetings and like I just had to learn the French culture, like in a nutshell. Like I didn't understand it. And it's very different in some ways. It's also very much the same in many ways, right? But the differences are what stood out immediately is I would sit in a meeting and I would hear these guys like get quite emotional with their debates and they would challenge each other and I would walk out like thinking like, whoa, like that was intense. But as we walk out the room, they're like, hey, bonjour, you want to go get coffee? Oui. And I'm like, what? We're smiling now? Everything's all good? And they're like, oh, yeah, it's just we challenge each other. It's how we get things done. You have to make sure you're doing the right thing. You say something, I challenge you. You challenge me. It's good, good, good. And I'm like, whoa, okay. Well, that wasn't as intense as I thought it was. This is just how they do business. They
Mhm.
bring up an idea and they want to be challenged because they want to make sure they're not missing something.
Correct.
And this is like not super American. Like we come in there, we're like, no, our idea is great, and I'm going to tell you why it's great. And like we kind of have that attitude. And like I'm not saying like we're not open to feedback and all that stuff, but it's like a different vibe. And you notice these things when you just have never been submerged in that culture. Have you experienced things like that where you're like just getting acclimated a little bit, and like once you kind of latch onto it, you're like, oh, I see it, I get it now.
Yes. And this is by far the most global company that I've worked for. I've been in global positions. Headspace was global and some of the other businesses I work with.
Mm.
However, by far the most global business that I've worked with. I think that we have 50 different countries. This is a remote first company. So 50 different countries of where we're employing people around the world. And like I said, being one of the few Americans, I definitely get some feedback that I can be quite animated. And also I can be quite intense to them too and passionate,
Well,
of
you
course, as
are
you
like the
know.
quintessential American businesswoman. I mean, yeah, yeah. The level of intensity is dialed up full speed all the time. Like, put your
Yes.
hats on. Yeah,
Yes, then they can definitely expect that from me now too. But I've also, for sure, language, culture, I'm dealing with all of those different things. So in the
yeah.
beginning, meeting some of my cross-functional partners who sit in all different parts of the world, the best thing that I could have done in the first month that I was there was I only got to know people for real. And I think that
Yeah.
that's, if you don't do that in the beginning as a leader, you're completely missing. If you don't meet with every single person that is
Yeah.
under your department, roll up wise, and all of your cross functionals, and then their people underneath, you're missing out. And that was the best thing that I could have done is just gone in and got to know people, knowing that there was going to be language barriers, knowing that like
Yeah.
culturally we're going to be figuring out how to communicate together. And communication is everything. If you get that wrong,
Yeah.
everything else is not going to be great. So
Yeah.
I definitely focused on that. And yes, there's challenges and lots of debates a lot of time. And sometimes, to your point, there can be frustration because it's like you kind of come in a little bit with a bias. You're like, gosh, I just feel like if we just did it like this, it would all be good. But it's like
Yeah.
I'm learning that there's other ways to
Yeah.
do things that are also very effective. And so I definitely feel challenged. And I'm definitely expanding my development within this role for sure right now.
It's definitely like a growth milestone when you get to the point in your career where you like you want people to poke holes in your ideas, right? Like you
Yes.
actually want like you're like, am I missing something? Because this seems like it could work. And like all of a sudden the business conversations become so much more productive when people enter the room that way. So that was one thing I remember. I don't know if that's a French thing or a Europe thing or if it's just these guys, right? Like maybe that's just their it might have just been their relationship, right? But like I definitely took that away from it and it meant a lot. And I did very similar to what you described there when I went to Air Call is I spent a ton of time meeting with people one-on-one, not just once, but twice, three times, four times. And like I didn't do that so much at doctor.com. It doesn't mean I didn't meet with them. Of course I did, but I didn't do that before I formed all my opinions. And that's why at
So
doctor.com,
important.
yeah, I made a bunch of assumptions. I made changes that I shouldn't have made. And then I had to backtrack. Air Call, I took my time. I got to know everyone, got to feel it all out, got to figure everything out. And the language thing, like what shocked me is in my first week, I'm like, I'm never going to be able to understand what most of them are saying. Their accent was so thick and they're from different parts of France. So there were different accents. Within like 30 days, I could understand what they were mumbling from across the room. Like it's weird how your brain works. Like it really does. Like it just starts to pick up on that stuff. And all of those things that might be intimidating, like in week one, just fade. Like it's just gone. And all of a sudden you're just in the French culture or the Dutch culture or whatever. And like it's just all good. And you end up walking away, I think, like more well-rounded, right? Like with some different elements to your life. And as a person who has definitely not done enough traveling, that for me was like just an eye-opening experience, and I really liked it. But let's get your thoughts on AI. So there's a lot to talk about here. I mean, there's like, are salespeople getting replaced by AI? Are we all going to lose our jobs? I mean, there's so much talk about this, and I have literally over the last year since bringing this podcast back and doing these episodes. I've been paying attention to what people say about this stuff. And even people like Jason Lemkin, I have seen come doing a full circle. Like you look at any of his content the last like month and it's all like AI's coming for you, blah, 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 blah. It's like a year ago, I don't even think he was saying that. Like I think he was almost like saying the opposite and whatnot. I could be wrong in that example, but there's a lot of that out there. And I don't think really any of us know like what's specifically going to happen. Personally, I think that we're not building a world where we eliminate humans. I just think the notion of that fear is ridiculous
I
because
agree.
it just will not happen. Because in order for that to happen, it would have to mean that we all decide someday to wake up and just stop doing things. Just because AI maybe comes for your job doesn't mean we're going to do nothing. You're going to find the next thing to do. You're going to, right? Like people used to carry water on their head up a hill just so that they could drink, And they would do that all day, and that was their job. Like they don't do that anymore. Do they just sit around lazy? Like no, they eventually like took on new roles and whatnot. And so, I just sort of say that as a blanket to begin with. Is like I think we're all safe, and everyone needs to stop worrying. But you need to be prepared for transitions, and like maybe things are going to change. And certainly, if you don't learn how to use AI, you will become quite obsolete as a person in many of these roles. But what are your thoughts there? I mean, let's talk specifically about the prospecting side, sort of the AI SDR. Have you played around with any of this stuff? Have you looked at any of it? Any thoughts there? I'm partnered with the guys from AI SDR, so I can try to learn about all this stuff, and they're super honest about it. Like it's this is not a one size fits all. This is not. The big takeaway I'll leave you with before I get your thoughts is that they make it very clear that you do not use AI to like figure out outbound. You are not going to hire like AI to like build your outbound
Crack your
motion.
outbound code.
No.
No.
Once you've mastered it and it's super repeatable, then look to see where AI can automate things. And maybe it's so transactional that it can automate most of your email in sort of like very high volume cases or whatever. But what are your thoughts? What do you think's going on there? Are we all doomed, or what's going to happen?
No, we're not all doomed. If anything, it is a huge time saver in so many areas of sales that we absolutely should be adopting. Now, I will say that we are at a point though, to what you said, if we are not getting better at using AI within our workflow and our day to day, for sure, on job listings, for TestGorilla, for example, going forward, we will not be hiring people if they don't have some level of proficiency in AI.
Mm.
And so I think that we've yet to really define exactly what that means, right? Because it's not like there's this one tool that's giving certifications out like a Salesforce,
Yeah, I was going to say, are
becomes a
you testing
credential.
for it? Yeah.
Yeah, so right now we're obviously not necessarily there yet, but there's a desire to hire people who obviously have some proficiency in, AI that can come in as a leader, especially as a leader. Super important for any managers or any leaders out there because you're going to have to come in and you're going to have to teach this to your teams and figure out again in your process where you can add this so you can accelerate. So that's really important. But to your point, absolutely not. It's not going to replace people. It's still sales for sure. It's always going to still need to be powered by someone in the
Yeah.
background because when you look at, and we didn't, go down this hole this time, but negotiation and sales tactics is very much based on in the moment, real time, and it's not something that a computer can just blurt out the answer to, right? You're talking about emotions, you're talking about play on words, you're talking about inflection, connecting with someone that really gets people, to turn a no into a yes or get them to say, okay, let's do this,
Yeah.
right? So AI is not in that place yet where they're going to be doing that for us, period, the end. And like
And
that's
it'll
still
be
the most,
scary when it is, because it will probably manipulate us beyond belief, right? Like
yes.
someone said to me, I forget who it was, like, think about what it would be like to negotiate with a super intelligent AI. Like you'll never win. So it's almost like who would even enter that conversation? And I think that we will learn that as because people will try this. Someone's going to try to build it. Someone's going to try to do it. And it's like, what are you doing? Like maybe you should just be better off like doing a self sign up with no negotiation, right? Like maybe you're overcomplicating some of this stuff too.
That's the other big thing is just the way that people buy is going to continue to evolve, which I think is
Yeah.
going to indicate what sales looks like in the future, like in the next 5 to 10
Yes.
years and how AI plays in sales. A lot of people are trying to build funnels, obviously, that get people through. And a lot of people don't even want to get on the phone and if they have all their answers. So
Bingo.
this is definitely going to change a lot and businesses have to embrace that. And it's okay if your product team wants to build a product-led growth motion that doesn't necessarily have a salesperson there. But I don't want people to think that it's still not powered by all people sales that are still going to insert themselves somewhere in the process, but it will
Yeah.
just evolve and look a little bit different.
Yeah.
But we're certainly not there yet. When it comes to AI tools, I've seen, I have had some of the calls with the AI SDRs, and oh man, the demos have been a wreck. I've had a
Oh,
couple,
have you had a, oh, so sorry. I misunderstood.
not with AI SDR,
I
but
thought
just
you
in
meant you got
general.
cold called by one. Okay.
No, but I've done
You
some
mean you took a demo?
demos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and like it wasn't working. It was like 10 second delay,
Yeah.
when I'm talking. So there's obviously some time to get there. I believe that the AI SDR that can work really well for certain industries that are
Mhm.
already like where people are already used to the automation
Yeah.
thing. So we're talking
Yeah.
about banks and insurance and healthcare stuff,
Automotive.
government. Like, please adapt
Yeah.
some of these things because your press one automated systems are dying.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that because every time I bring this up, I think most people, and maybe it's just because the people I talk to are in this industry, but everyone just thinks about B2B SaaS. And I'm like, you don't realize like there is an automotive industry where people will call an 800 number, to get new tires. And like they have a human being that's calling them to ask them basic questions over and over. Like
Correct.
this stuff can be automated and it will be faster and better and cheaper. And like, when you buy your tires, you're paying for that person's salary, right? And so like there's so many
Exactly.
instances like
E-commerce
that.
should
Yeah.
have AI SDRs. Like
Yeah.
everything that they're doing e-commerce wise is what we talked about. Doesn't necessarily require a salesperson. They should be adopting these tools to
Yeah.
optimize their process.
Yeah.
Healthcare, Government, God, government really needs like a facelift on this
Oh
one.
my God. Government needs, they need to become, it almost seems like the Doge team is kind of has bringing a startup, like vibe to the
Yes,
government, which I like, despite whether how, regardless of how you
sure.
feel about what they're doing, there's something so cool about they've got these young like hackers staying up all night, like making shit happen fast, breaking things, fixing things, whatever. Like, but we need way more of that. But also, it needs to be tamed. Like, there is a reason the government moves slow, and it's so we don't destroy the world overnight and all that stuff. And so it goes both ways. But there is something refreshing about like, oh, maybe we'll have some websites for the government that don't look like they were built in 1982, and we can
Correct.
like actually log into like a website that looks pretty good and stuff. I've noticed they've improved the Social Security website. It looks like it's been like completely overhauled. It's like modernized. Like little
Yes.
things like that are really nice. But you mentioned the piece about the buyer, and I want to mention that, which is like we focus so much on like will salespeople be replaced, and I think we lose sight of like what really matters is what buyers want. And like, do buyers want to talk to us? Well, we already know they'd rather not, right? Like, if they could figure out how to get somewhere without talking to us, sure, they're going to do it. And that's the same reason that people now shop on Amazon instead of walking into Nordstrom and having someone help them pick out all their shit, right?
Mhm.
We were looking for the least friction, right? And so I think as we think about it that way, AI is more likely to sort of in a sense replace parts of the sales process by assisting the buyer, but doesn't mean that it's a sales tool. It means that the buyer is using ChatGPT to do their own research and they're figuring out all sorts of stuff. Whereas they used to have to call you and you were the only one that could maybe tell them as the salesperson, right? So I think
Exactly.
that's the bigger piece. But as a salesperson, like as long as you're selling a good product, this should be good news to you because it means they're coming to you like already knowing a
Ready to
bunch.
buy
Yeah,
or
yeah.
more ready to buy, obviously from an interest and
Yeah,
awareness and intent level.
exactly. Exactly. Where it sucks is if you're selling garbage because their research is going to tell them that it's garbage. And so that those are the people it sucks for. But this is all net positive, right? Like I think that that's all overall a good thing.
Yes, I do think that salespeople are having a hard time adapting AI within their current process because
Yeah.
we've all been doing it for so long a certain way. And I think that's probably the biggest hurdle ahead of us, I would say, in the next 2 years.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Figuring out where it works, how it works best, and will it replace salespeople? My take is that it's semantics because on one hand you could say that it will because sales teams will ultimately be smaller. When you create tools that make us more efficient, you need less people. Like that's just how it works. The spreadsheet meant less people doing math on their notebooks and stuff. Like you can all of a sudden calculate stuff really quickly, and so we need less accountants or whatever. But what I think happens is also, and I mentioned this to Harry Stebbings on a tweet yesterday. He was talking about like, I think he said something to the tune of, I think people are going to be really surprised how many jobs are going to be replaced and that everyone's going to be on the unemployment line. And I adamantly disagree because I think that what that assumes is that if your current job is replaced today, that you're just going to accept that and go unemployed. And I don't think that that's how humans work. I think they find the next thing to do, right? And so if we're going to see smaller sales teams because they're more efficient or they're using AI, what I think that means is that we will have more sales teams. We will have more companies because it becomes easier to start a company. Whereas today, maybe you need $2 million from a venture capital fund, but tomorrow, and maybe you need to be an engineer because you need to know how to build the thing. But like we're getting closer and closer to salespeople being able to launch their own companies with a little bit of AI, a little bit of help, not even so much money. They stay remote. They don't need an office. They don't need all these things. And so you might have smaller teams, but I think we're going to have more teams. And
I
that's the
agree.
upside.
And I think that hiring sales teams right now is probably the riskiest thing for most places because a lot
Yeah.
of people don't know how to be successful in sales right
Yeah.
now, just in general.
Yeah.
And so the whole point is for us to become more effective and more predictable
Mm.
with our emotions. So that way there can be a lot more surety and investing within a sales function. So to your point, I believe that people will have more confidence. They will have more predictability of the effectiveness of their sales team instead of all of this right now, up and down. Let's invest. Okay, let's cut. Let's invest. It's not working. So we need
Yeah.
to understand what is working.
100% with you. And I got this next question here, but I'm not sure if the way that I ask it will make a bunch of sense. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm understanding your career is, I mean, at Single Platform, we were doing full cycle sales, right?
Yep.
Then you were leading BDR, SDR, and
Mhm.
then now you're running a full team. Did I got
Yes.
that right? So, okay. So what I wanted to ask, I just wanted to make sure I had that right, is like, what's been your biggest learning curve now coming in? You're not just doing the SDR, BDR world, you're overseeing the whole thing. Have there been like some big like shocks or like, oof, I didn't think of that, or any just big learning curves or adjustments there that you'd like to share?
Yes. So right now at TestGorilla, I have the sales development function and the account executives and the AM team rolling up under me for North America.
Oh, so you've got all three. Okay.
Yeah. So what's incredible about that though is
Full
that
customer life cycle.
I get to objectively also diagnose and see everything the entire way through. And the best thing that I could have done again when I got to TestGorilla is I went and spent time 2 weeks deep dive with each team.
Mm,
And I did an intake in the very beginning of all the little things that I was noticing and hearing and seeing that could get optimized. And that ended up informing our revenue operations roadmap, for things that we need to fix and prioritize throughout the year. And so that was by far one of the most effective things that I could have done to understand and onboard myself within the business. And it's definitely something that I will always do at any company that I go to. One of the first things that I'll do is I'll go in and I'll do an exercise like that and then work backwards in the priorities of things and then communicate that out so everyone has a clear roadmap of milestones of improvements that will be coming. Because most of the time, teams are really looking for that information and they're flying blind and they're kind of just working in a state that is not ideal without even understanding if this is going to get better. Right.
yeah.
So that was one of the first things. The other thing that I continuously notice, not just at TestGorilla, but every company that I go into, people are looking for advocates. They need to be inspired by their leaders. It's so important. And I realized that coming in, that no one's had an inspirational leader in a while at this company.
Mm,
You can tell. You'd be surprised. Some encouragement and literally just connecting with people about what they really want to do in their career and what's the so what for grinding it out every single day. Why are
yeah.
you signing up for this?
Yeah.
And understanding that first and foremost is by far the most important thing that I could do. I would say the thing that has been the most surprising to me is I would say in general, just the tech stack and evaluating what the tech stack could do to us. I don't think was placed early enough in the planning process because
Mm,
going back to what you said, it's like we build annual plans and then sometimes we think if we just throw bodies at the plan and we give them a $500,000 quota for a year, that equals all of this new business revenue that we're going to get, which is not the case, as
yeah.
you already know. If
Yep.
you don't have the mechanics right and the right tools in place with the right
Mm,
leadership and the right profiles of people for the stage of the company that you're at, that plan that you thought you were going to throw bodies at that were going to carry that
yeah.
quota is not going to come into fruition.
So I wholeheartedly agree, and I think the most common mistake that I see and have always seen, and I am pretty sure like my buddy Scott Leese agrees with me on this one.
Yeah.
And this is aside from overhiring and like the obvious stuff, but it's that everyone seems to often put sales operations and the tech stack just like it's sort of as like this afterthought. And I think the reason they do it is like founders, they're developers, they're often engineers. And so their view on things is like start out minimal and like we'll build it as we go and all sorts of stuff. But what they don't realize is that once you hire more salespeople, changing the tech stack is insanely more difficult and getting the whole just the operational flow and the tools and everything right. Now that you have 50 salespeople, it's way, way, way harder, right? Not just to implement, but to train them, to get them on board, all of that stuff. And now you have to change their habits. Like when you really take the time to get that right initially, it makes things so much easier. But yeah, I mean, are you sort of like, oh, I wish I made some changes before bringing in all the people, and now it's sort of hard to sort of flip the switch on some tools?
I would say that the biggest thing is, and by the way, I walked right into planning as soon as I got to TestGorilla, obviously in Q4. So it was a lot to obviously walk into, and I really felt pressured, I would say, to take in as much information as possible so I can have the most informed decision on whatever it is that I'm being asked to make decisions on.
Yeah.
So that was my biggest challenge for sure in the beginning. But I think this is where the tension point comes in between what's actually not in my purview and in my control. Because,
Mm,
we're talking about things that are in my control, but let's be real. Like you said, venture capitalists, they are all pressuring all of their portfolio companies to have like 80% growth year, right? And they don't mind to do that growth at all costs because if one of them hits,
Yep.
it's a good thing for them. But what
Bingo.
about you could be part of some of the other ones that don't, and
Bingo.
that's the reality of the situation. And so where a lot of companies get this wrong is the timeline in which they think that these outcomes are going to be produced. They are so far off the ramp
Well,
of
you
what
know
it takes.
why? Do you know why that is? And it's like, it's so obvious because they're not making forecasts based on their actual data. They're making a forecast based on what's called T2 D3 usually, which is like a triple double, double triple,
It's a
whatever.
bet.
It's a bet. It's exactly what it is. We're going to take 20 of these companies, and they know that there's these very specific benchmarks that change the valuation of the business. And so they don't really even care about the details of the business. Like, oh, well, we grew 60% last year and we added this. And so maybe we can grow by this rate. That's not how they do it, right? And I learned how to manage a business at CVS. And that's how every business has always run. You look at last year's performance, you consider the changes you're making, you consider inflation, you consider the market, and you make a forecast with like some, ambitious growth, but something that seems realistic, right? And you do
Yes.
that year over year. You're always looking at last year, last year, last year. And everything at CVS was by the week, right? So there's week 1 is January 1st, right? And then you have week 52. And so you were actually comparing the week number to that same week last year. Because in retail, like the time of the year matters, right? Christmas, all this type of stuff. And so that was like my business training, which is like how you really run a business, but we're not really running businesses. And I hate to say that, but we're running investment strategies. We are running investment vessels, and we are sort of part of a gambling scheme, for lack of a better word, where they're going to take these companies that look like they have some potential and they're going to do what you just said. They're going to push this model on them. And if one or two work out, well, we just made all our money back and we're doing great, right? And we don't care so much about the rest. But, the downside that I've come to learn of that is that there are a lot of lives that are impacted along the way. And unfortunately, it doesn't work out in the way that, if the one or two companies make it in that portfolio, the other 18 companies are fucked. They don't get a share of they don't get a
Correct.
taste of the action.
Nothing.
And maybe I would be okay with this if they did. Maybe if we said, hey, we're going to take 20 companies and 2 of you are going to make it, we're going to split the money. It sounds ludicrous, would never happen. But that's the only scenario in which any of this actually would be even close to like a fair way of trying to encourage people to grow their business. Because otherwise, you're literally essentially saying you got about an 80% chance of this failing, right? Because it only works out like 10 to 20% of the time.
Yes, that is the reality of
Yeah.
what we are doing when we are signing up to work in startups. And that is
Yeah.
part of the environment. And all we can do is go in and try our best. Of course, I know that sounds really elementary, but that's the reality of the situation. And getting behind a product that you really believe in,
Bingo.
that is something that you see the roadway, like the roadmap on, that you can ride the wave with, is
Yeah.
why I joined TestGorilla. This company is a unicorn company, in my opinion, and it's got a lot of the elements as to what I'm looking for when joining a startup. And so I'm really excited to see where this continues to go because it's been up and to the right. And working out the mechanics of these details is part of the process along the way. But of course, we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, well, it sounds like things are headed in the right direction. You've accomplished so much in such a short amount of time. What are the plans? I know you said you're putting a pause on hiring for now, but what are the plans for the rest of the year? Is it
So
about fine tuning what you've got?
exactly. So we're doubling down on all the new people that have obviously just started, and we're heavy on training and enablement right now and optimizing our process and strengthening our feedback loop with the marketing team and effectively getting into the tools that we already have and deploying the features that are not being utilized, which is everybody know is sitting in their closet as something that they need to like open up
Yeah.
the door and clean out. And so that is a huge focus. And then again, it all comes back to the most important thing that we could do is coach our salespeople. There's not a magic wand of anything more complex than literally just hiring, ramping, coaching people, and inspiring them to do their best work. We forget to do that as leaders because we're so tactical, but the inspiration piece is the piece that I double down on. And that's so important.
It makes all the difference. I mean, we probably took it for granted at Single Platform how good the vibes
We
were. And
totally did.
I mean, Adam is a superstar at it. I mean, the guy can just come in and get in front of the room, and in 5 minutes, you guys are just like, I want to crush it today. Like it's just
Yes.
he just has a way of doing that. And no matter how hard I tried to replicate that, I don't have that like he does. I'm strong in other areas. I have other ways of compensating for it and whatnot. But like he's got some secret sauce to it. You've got that incredible infectious type of energy. I have to sort of put it on a little bit. It's in me, but like sometimes it's just not. Sometimes I'm just not feeling it, and I can't fake it. And like some people just have that ability to just turn that on all the time, and it really does. It makes the job fun. It makes you want to be there. It makes you want to work hard, and it makes it like okay when someone's gonna like give you some tough feedback because you love the person because you know that like they make you feel good all the time. So that leads us to on the outro here. Obviously, I've got all the links in the show notes here, but we've got a few for you. So there's Zen Seller, there's Quantum Consulting, and then you've got your podcast on YouTube. Do you want to explain what those are real quick?
Yes. So Zen Seller is my consulting LLC that I started a couple years ago, where I help early stage tech startups or founders get their sales off the ground. And then Quantum Sales Consulting is I'm a part of a group of other sales leaders who also provide a network of consulting services, which is exciting. So some of the bigger projects, if you're going through mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, specifically actually in the healthcare space. So that's where a lot of my work has been. And then the YouTube channel, FDI Takeover, is my podcast around mental health advocacy. And it's about freaking doing it. It's about living your truth, bossing out, getting out of your own way, but healing from your trauma along the way, which is an essential part to being successful in anything that you do. So I bring coaches and healers and therapists onto my show, and we break down different topics around mental health. And this is a fun project for me. This is not Alex at the tech company. This is not Alex
Yeah.
at the consulting. This is just me doing my
When you
thing
sent it
and
to me, I
trying
was
to.
like, this is Alex right here.
Yes,
This is
yes.
it.
It's a
Yeah.
lot of fun for me, and I'm just hoping to provide people with space for breaking free and just resources for mental health. That's really important to me.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I've got all the links down in the show notes. Everybody go check it out. I would skip straight ahead to the YouTube. Probably start there,
Yeah,
right?
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good stuff, Alex. This was great to catch up. We'll have to do it again sometime. So happy for you. It's been awesome to watch everything. But I mean, you haven't lost it. You still got that fire. You've got it, and
That's
it's
good
awesome.
news.
Yeah, yeah. Don't ever let that go. But it's a breath of fresh air to speak to you, and we'll have to catch up again soon sometime. Keep in touch.
All right. Thanks so much, Colin. I appreciate it.
Thank you.